We are starting with the section labeled Reformation in England. Reformation in England. That is chapter 12, section 4 notes packet. All right, we're on the chapter 12, section 4 notes packet, and that is Reformation in England. We just got done dealing with John Calvin and the beginnings of Calvinism, him coming after Martin Luther, adding to Martin Luther's kind of teachings with the whole predestination thing, and also kind of creating a church/government entity happening, which was interesting as well, because we deal in the United States with that whole separation of church and state. So it's interesting to see that kind of happening. At this time, though, there was really no separation between church and state. There was the Catholic Church and the government of choice at the time. At that point, they were dealing with a king, an emperor, and so the Catholic Church and the emperor were working together, and then we see this break off, and the things that were bothering them, we see them kind of going back into. So, again, why do we study history? If we don't study history, we're doomed to repeat it. We keep doing the same things over and over again. So, the Reformation in England. Again, you can just kind of follow along, highlight what I tell you to, and just pay attention. The Reformation in England had its beginning in politics, not religion. All right? So, we originally see, you want to underline that, we originally see that the Reformation started as people wanting to change how politics were working. But religion was a natural offshoot of the politics at the time. King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, because she had not been able to have a son. Why would Henry have wanted a son? Why do you think any king would want a son? No one?
So they can continue on the family?
Exactly. So they can, well, not just continue on the family name, but who takes over the throne if the king dies? The son. So they wanted to yes, continue the bloodline, but also to continue the bloodline on the throne, right? Women would have been viewed as, it didn't mean that women weren't on thrones, right? Queens, or in charge, but that a lot of times they might have been viewed as a little weaker by some kings, that they would have wanted a son on the throne. We'll see that didn't matter. Male, female, weakness can come in all forms. So, or good leaders can come in all forms. So, Henry wants to get rid of this wife, but that's against the church. The Catholic Church did not believe in divorce. And so, he wants to marry this woman named Anne Boleyn. All right. Henry asked the Pope to annul, which means to declare his marriage invalid to Catherine, but the Pope refuses. All right. You can underline that. That really gets Henry mad, right? He's the king. Right? When kings say something, what normally happens?
It gets done.
It gets done. Like, I said it, do it. Right? I say that to my kids at home sometimes. Like, whoa. This ain't a democracy. This is a dictatorship. When I speak, you listen. I'm the king. Go do what I told you to do. And then my wife goes, that's enough. And then, of course, she's the queen. She's in charge most of the time. So it's this attitude of, I'm the king. I said I want something. Pope, you should do it. The Pope says, no, I'm not going to annul your marriage. You're married to Catherine. Stay married to Catherine. So Henry says, well, you know what? I'm the king. I'm going to do whatever I want. So I'm going to figure out a way to make this happen. So he asks the church courts in England for an annulment. So he goes beyond the Pope. The Pope's the head, though. Right? So if a church or if a court church goes against him, that's not good either, right? Because now you have the church kind of eating itself up, right? Like this kind of inner fighting. So in 1533, underline this, Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, granted the annulment, and then Henry marries Anne Boleyn. So another church official grants the annulment. And the annulment basically means you were not even married. Like the marriage never existed. Okay? The next year, Henry asks Parliament. Here we see this kind of Reformation happening. We see the breaking down of the Catholic Church. Henry asks Parliament to separate the church in England from the Pope in Rome. All right? So he's wanting to break off. The Parliament passed, underline, the Act of Supremacy of 1534. You can keep underlining. This act made the king the head of the Church of England. Henry used his new power to close monasteries and sell land and possessions. All right, so we now see a massive change in the Catholic Church. All right. It is a drastic change. The Pope is no longer in charge in the Church of England. The king now is. So now any questions of faith are answerable to who? The king. The king will make all decisions in people's lives now. It won't just be political. It will also be religious, their faith. All right? That can be dangerous because does a king really have any knowledge of the Holy Scriptures, as the Catholics would call it, the Bible? Would the king have any real no? So we get back to this concept of people wanting knowledge of Scripture, knowledge of their faith, and they really have getting it from nowhere. And we see the king using his anger towards the Catholic Church to continue to kind of victimize the Catholic Church. He shuts down the monasteries. The monasteries is where all the priests and the monks live. So he closes those down. Then he sells their land. Well, that's power. Remember we talked about that earlier in the year. Land equals power. If you have a lot of land, you have power. Catholic churches possess a lot of land. You ever seen a Catholic church nowadays, what they look like? A lot of them, a lot of them are massive. Walk through cities. Some of the Catholic churches, they're gorgeous, right? They're the huge cathedrals. They take up city blocks. They take, if you're in the countryside, a lot of Catholic churches take up lots of land. They are just gorgeous features of the countryside sometimes, and of even when you're in a city. So by selling off these lands, he's lessening their power. They're losing money, lots and lots of money. And where is the money now going to be going to? The king. Who's going to really like the king? Whoever gets that land. Does that make sense? Because now those people, right? Like if I sell land and I give it to, I call up Ariana. I'm like, hey, Ariana, you want some land? I'll sell it to you cheap. Isn't Ariana going to like me now? I'm gaining Ariana's support. Well, the Catholic Church is going to hate me, but I don't care. They didn't give me the marriage annulment that I wanted. And let's say Ariana's got some money and she's rich. I might want Ariana on my side. I want her to support me. So I'm going to sell it to her real cheap because I'm a king. I don't necessarily need a ton of money. Ariana now loves me. And Ariana's talking to all her friends. Yo, King Venuto's the man, right? Look at what he did to me for me. He got me all this land. He sold it. They don't care about the Catholic Church anymore. They just like what the king's doing for them, okay? So we see this opportunity where the Catholic Church's power is being lessened and Henry is gaining his power. This put a lot of money into his treasury, right? Because he's selling the land, so he is gaining money. It also created the new supporters, right? Ariana is going to be a new supporter for me because the people bought this land, never wanted to give it back to the monks. And they didn't want the church to gain power, right? Despite the changes, Henry's religious beliefs, interestingly enough, remained similar to the Catholic Church. Remember, he was not a theologian. He wouldn't have known power. He wouldn't have known the Bible. And so he kind of just continued on with the same basic teachings of that time period. What's up, brother?
I just saw there's a ping pong table. We need to get brackets and
I'm in. I love ping pong. All right, we'll play.
March Madness.
Sounds good. We got nothing else to do, right? So when when Henry died in 1547, his son Edward VI took the throne, right? Remember, he wanted a son. So he has a son, Edward VI. He was only 9 years old. What's up? He was only 9 years old and he was sick. Remember we said, just because you're a male doesn't mean you're going to be this strong leader. So now we see Henry dies. The new king is a 9-year-old sickly kid. Well, that's a great leader, right? The odds are he's going to end up dying. He looks sickly like this dude, right?
Was it the first emperor of China?
No, we're talking about the Reformation in England. You were way off. Stick to math.
That was my next guess.
So during Edward's reign, we see church officials start to move the Church of England, all right, in a Protestant direction. Remember, he's a little kid. So these leaders of the church can kind of move things the way they want. Did you ever see, now I just blanked on the movie, Lord of the Rings? All right, if you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, there's this one guy, he's the king, but he's under the spell of this other guy who's constantly whispering in his ear, like, we should do this. And the king goes, we should do that, right? And that's what's really happening with this little kid. He has no control. He can't do anything. And this little kid is like, yeah, let's do whatever these guys tell me. Right? They have more power than me. and so they start doing it, all right? Parliament gave clergy the right to marry. They created these new church services, so we're seeing all of religion go really Protestant, all right? Many people oppose these changes, and when Edward died, when Edward VI died, that sickly little kid, Mary, Henry's daughter, Catherine of Aragon, right, remember her, takes over the throne. So we see a woman now take power, and Catherine is a beast. She is a take charge leader. So she really starts ramping things up. She's a Catholic. She wants to restore the Catholic Church in England. And we start seeing her move things back towards the Catholic Church, all right? But we see that what she tries to do has some opposite effects. Did you ever hear of Bloody Mary? Did you ever hear, maybe, back in the day, people used to say, if you say in a mirror 3 times, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary shows up and kills you. There's this new horror movie that's coming out. It's a remake of an old one called Candyman. If you say Candyman 3 times in a mirror, he shows up and he takes you out. Well, Bloody Mary actually was a real person. It was Catherine, all right? She started killing Protestants. She was killing anybody who was against the Catholic Church, all right? She was burning them at the stake, sometimes 300 at a time. Now, you would think that would scare people into going back to the Catholic Church, but it had the opposite effect. It scared people to hating her and hating the Catholic Church and remaining Protestant. All right? Makes sense? Kind of like the mean teacher, right? Sometimes people think if I'm mean, people will respect me and they'll do what I want them to do. Well, sometimes that ends up causing more problems in a classroom, right? You ever seen that before?
Bronx Tale, better to be feared than loved.
Better to be feared than loved, exactly, right? So it didn't work in this respect, though. Bloody Mary did not work out well for her. People ended up not liking her. And by the end of her reign, the church was actually more Protestant than when she started. We got all that? Pretty easy stuff. All right, I'm going to stop the video there because I think that's good stuff.